My name is Elena Rivera, and if you're reading this, you're probably wondering how a simple disagreement in a corporate boardroom turned into the kind of story they write books about. Or maybe you've heard whispers around the water cooler at your own job, how someone got fired for no good reason, or how power can corrupt even the most polished executives. Well, let me tell you, there's always more to it than meets the eye. I used to believe in the system. I believed that hard work paid off, that loyalty mattered, and that integrity was still valued in the corporate world. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was. But don't get me wrong, I'm not bitter. Not entirely, anyway. What happened to me wasn't just an injustice. It became my awakening. And trust me when I say this, revenge isn't as sweet as people think. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes it takes on a life of its own. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let me start from the beginning. When I first joined Sterling Tech Solutions 5 years ago, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. The company had a reputation for innovation, offering employees creative freedom and opportunities to grow. As a software engineer with a knack for problem solving, I thrived in environments like that. My specialty? Developing cutting-edge algorithms to streamline data processing. It sounds boring unless you're into tech, but what made my work stand out was its practicality. I didn't just build systems. I built solutions that saved companies millions. The project that changed everything started as a side hustle. Late nights, weekends, endless cups of coffee. It all added up to something groundbreaking. A new type of encryption algorithm designed specifically for cloud storage security. Think of it as Fort Knox for digital files. No one could crack it without authorization. At least that's what my tests showed. When I pitched the idea to our VP of Product Development, Rachel Monroe, she loved it. Loved it so much that she fast-tracked funding and resources to turn my prototype into a full-fledged product. At the time, I felt unstoppable. For months, I worked tirelessly alongside a small team of engineers. We refined the algorithm, tested it under every conceivable scenario, and prepared it for launch. Meanwhile, Rachel acted as our cheerleader, presenting updates to the executive board and securing additional support. She called me her secret weapon during meetings, praising my vision and dedication. Things were good, or so I thought. Then came the day everything shifted. I'll never forget walking into Rachel's office, expecting another routine progress meeting. Instead, she greeted me with a tight smile and gestured for me to sit down. Her tone was clipped, professional, almost rehearsed. "Elena," she began, folding her hands neatly on the desk, "we need to talk about the future of the encryption project." Something about those words sent a chill down my spine. I nodded cautiously, waiting for her to continue. That's when she dropped the bombshell. Effective immediately, you're being removed from the project. Don't worry, it's not personal. Not personal. How could firing someone from their passion project not be personal? I stared at her, stunned, trying to process what she'd said. Before I could respond, she launched into a prepared speech about restructuring priorities and reallocating resources. According to her, the company needed someone with broader experience to lead the final stages of development. Translation: they wanted someone else to take credit for my work. To make matters worse, Rachel handed me a severance package as if it were some kind of consolation prize. "You've done amazing work here," she assured me, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "But this is the best decision for the company moving forward." Best decision for the company? Had she forgotten who created the damn algorithm in the first place? I left her office feeling numb, clutching the folder with my severance details like it might bite me. Over the next few days, I replayed our conversation over and over in my head, searching for answers. Why had they pushed me out? Was it because I refused to play politics? Because I spoke up too often in meetings? Or was it simply easier to replace me than deal with the fact that a woman had developed something revolutionary? Whatever the reason, one thing became painfully clear. Sterling Tech wasn't the meritocracy I'd imagined. It was a machine, grinding down anyone who dared step out of line. And I had just become collateral damage. Reeling from the betrayal, I threw myself into figuring out my next move. At first, I considered suing them for wrongful termination. After all, I'd signed confidentiality agreements and intellectual property clauses when I joined the company. Surely I had rights? But after consulting with a lawyer, I learned the truth. thanks to the fine print buried deep in my contract. Sterling Tech technically owned any inventions I created while employed there. Even though I'd poured my heart and soul into the encryption algorithm, it legally belonged to them. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. All those late nights, all that effort, it was gone. Just like that. Worse still, rumors began circulating that Rachel planned to present the project as her own brainchild during an upcoming investor summit. The same woman who dismissed me with a patronizing pat on the back would soon bask in the glory of my creation. That's when the anger set in. Not the fiery rage you see in movies, but a slow-burning fury that simmered beneath the surface. I couldn't let them win. Not like this. If Sterling Tech wanted to treat me as expendable, then fine. But I wasn't going down quietly. As fate would have it, I stumbled upon a loophole. While reviewing my old contracts, I noticed something unusual. The patents for several earlier versions of the algorithm hadn't been transferred to Sterling Tech somehow. Amidst the chaos of transitioning leadership teams, these documents had slipped through the cracks. Legally speaking, I still own the licenses for those prototypes. It wasn't perfect. They weren't as advanced as the final version, but they were close enough to cause problems. With the right tweaks, they could compete directly with Sterling Tech's flagship product. And unlike my former employer, I had nothing to lose. Overnight, I transformed from a grieving ex-employee into a strategist, plotting my comeback. I reached out to old contacts in the industry, pitching the idea of licensing my older patents to rival companies. At first, they hesitated. Who was I really? Just another disgruntled worker with an axe to grind? But once I demonstrated the potential of my technology and hinted at the drama unfolding behind the scenes, they started listening. One by one, offers rolled in. Some wanted exclusive rights to the patents. Others proposed partnerships. Each deal brought me closer to achieving my goal, dismantling the empire that had cast me aside. By the time Rachel took the stage at the Investor Summit, touting the encryption algorithm as Sterling Tech's crowning achievement, I was ready to strike. The morning after the summit, headlines exploded across tech blogs and financial news outlets. Competitors announced their own encryption products, eerily similar to Sterling Tech's offering. Analysts speculated about leaks and insider sabotage. Investors panicked, dumping shares faster than Rachel could spin damage control. Within days, Sterling Tech's stock price plummeted, wiping out millions in market value. Watching the fallout unfold felt surreal. Part of me relished the irony. Rachel had fired me to protect her career, only to watch it unravel because of me. Yet another part wondered if I'd gone too far. Revenge is a double-edged sword after all. Every victory came with consequences, and I couldn't shake the feeling that mine were far from over. Still, I pressed on. There were more battles to fight, more pieces to move into place. This wasn't just about settling scores anymore. It was about proving that ideas, real, transformative ideas, couldn't be contained or controlled by corporations. They belonged to the people brave enough to create them. And as for Rachel, let's just say karma has a way of finding its mark. But that's a story for another time. The chaos that followed the Investor Summit was both exhilarating and terrifying. I watched from the sidelines as Sterling Tech scrambled to contain the fallout. But it was like trying to hold back a tsunami with sandbags. Competitors pounced on the opportunity I'd created, flooding the market with encryption solutions powered by my older patents. Each new announcement chipped away at Sterling Tech's dominance, turning what had once been their flagship product into just another option in a crowded field. Rachel Monroe became the face of the crisis, her polished veneer cracking under the pressure. She gave interviews, held emergency meetings with stakeholders, and tried to reassure everyone that Sterling Tech's version was still superior. But the damage was done. Investors didn't care about technical superiority. They cared about stability, trust, and returns. And with every passing day, those things slipped further out of Rachel's grasp. Meanwhile, I wasn't sitting idly by. My newfound leverage opened doors I never thought possible. Venture capitalists courted me, eager to fund startups based on my technology. Former colleagues reached out, offering their expertise or simply expressing solidarity. For the first time in years, I felt alive, not because of the money rolling in, but because I finally understood the power of taking control of your own narrative. But power comes at a cost. As the dust settled, I began to see cracks forming in my carefully constructed plan. Some of the companies licensing my patents weren't exactly ethical. One, in particular, caught my attention: Obsidian Data Systems. They specialized in surveillance software for government agencies and private corporations, often operating in legal gray areas. When they approached me with an offer to license one of my older algorithms, I hesitated. Their reputation preceded them, and partnering with them felt wrong on so many levels. Still, desperation made me reckless. I told myself it was just business, that I could distance myself from how they used the technology. So I signed the agreement, pocketing a hefty upfront payment and convincing myself I'd done nothing wrong. It wasn't until weeks later, when news broke about Obsidian using my algorithm to track dissidents in an authoritarian regime, that the weight of my decision hit me. People were being arrested, interrogated, even disappeared, all thanks to tools built on something I'd created. I wanted to scream, to tear up the contract and wash my hands of the whole mess. But it was too late. The genie was out of the bottle, and there was no putting it back. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the city lights through my window, feeling hollow. Was this what revenge looked like? A series of escalating choices that left you questioning who you really were. Despite the guilt gnawing at me, I couldn't afford to stop. Not yet. Sterling Tech was still standing, albeit precariously, and Rachel Monroe remained at the helm. If anything, the crisis had only hardened her resolve. She doubled down on marketing campaigns, slashed prices, and poured resources into developing upgrades for the encryption algorithm. Her goal was clear: reclaim the market share she'd lost and bury anyone who stood in her way, including me. And then came the subpoena. It arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who looked far too cheerful for the occasion. The letter inside was formal, curt, and unmistakably threatening. Sterling Tech was suing me for breach of contract, intellectual property theft, and malicious interference with their business operations. According to them, my actions had caused irreparable harm to the company, and they intended to make me pay, literally and figuratively. At first, panic set in. How could they do this? I'd played by the rules, or at least I'd exploited the loopholes they'd left wide open. But as I read through the document again, a different emotion took hold. Defiance. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about sending a message to every corporation that thought it could exploit its employees without consequence. If Rachel wanted a fight, I'd give her one. I called my lawyer immediately. Together, we mapped out a strategy that would turn the lawsuit into a PR nightmare for Sterling Tech. We leaked internal emails showing how Rachel had sidelined key contributors, including me, during the development process. We highlighted clauses in my original contract that contradicted their claims. And most importantly, we rallied public opinion, framing the case as a David versus Goliath battle between innovation and corporate greed. The media ate it up. Overnight, I went from being a disgruntled ex-employee to a symbol of resistance against systemic injustice. Journalists wrote profiles calling me the whistleblower coder and Silicon Valley's Robin Hood. Supporters flooded social media with hashtags like #StandWithElena and #TechJustice. Even some of Sterling Tech's own employees reached out, thanking me for shining a light on the toxic culture they'd endured in silence. For a while, it seemed like momentum was on my side. But Rachel wasn't one to back down easily. She countered our narrative with a charm offensive, appearing on talk shows and podcasts to paint herself as a victim of misinformation. She claimed she'd always supported my work, that firing me had been a painful but necessary decision, and that my actions were driven by bitterness rather than principle. To my dismay, some people bought it. As the trial date approached, tensions reached a boiling point. Every day brought new revelations, accusations, and counter-accusations. Friends warned me that winning might come at a steep personal cost, that the stress of the lawsuit could consume me entirely. They weren't wrong. Sleep became elusive, replaced by endless nights spent poring over documents and strategizing with my team. My relationships suffered. Old friends drifted away, unsure how to navigate the storm surrounding me. Yet, amidst the chaos, something unexpected happened. I found allies in unlikely places. Other women in tech reached out, sharing their own stories of discrimination, harassment, and betrayal. Some offered advice, others provided emotional support. Slowly but surely, I realized I wasn't fighting this battle alone. There was a larger movement brewing, one that demanded accountability and fairness in an industry long dominated by privilege and exclusion. One evening, as I prepared for another round of depositions, I received a message from someone named Priya Patel. She introduced herself as a former senior engineer at Sterling Tech who had left the company years ago after encountering similar treatment. "You're not the first," she wrote, "and unfortunately you won't be the last. But maybe, just maybe, you can change things." Her words stayed with me long after I closed my laptop. Maybe this wasn't just about settling scores or claiming what was rightfully mine. Maybe it was about creating a future where no one else had to go through what I did, where talent mattered more than politics and integrity outweighed ambition. With renewed determination, I walked into the courtroom the next morning, ready to face whatever came next. Whatever the outcome, I knew one thing for certain: the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The trial was grueling. Days turned into weeks as lawyers on both sides presented their cases, dissecting every email, contract, and decision that had led us to this moment. Rachel Monroe sat across the courtroom, her polished demeanor now tinged with exhaustion. She'd spent millions defending Sterling Tech's reputation, but the cracks in her armor were showing. Every time she took the stand, her answers grew more defensive, her tone sharper. The jury could see it too. The woman who once exuded confidence now looked like someone clinging to the last remnants of control. For my part, I held steady. My team had prepared me well, ensuring I stayed calm under pressure and focused on the facts. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke clearly and honestly, laying bare not just the events that had unfolded, but also the broader issues at play. The systemic undervaluation of women in tech, the exploitation of employee innovation, and the toxic culture that allowed people like Rachel to thrive unchecked. By the end of my testimony, even the judge seemed moved. As closing arguments approached, the tension in the room was palpable. Both sides delivered impassioned speeches, painting starkly different pictures of what justice should look like. Rachel's lawyer framed me as a disgruntled ex-employee seeking revenge, while my attorney argued that I was fighting for accountability and fairness, not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever been wronged by corporate greed. Then came the verdict. When the foreman stood to read the jury's decision, I felt my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone in the courtroom could hear it. Each word landed like a hammer blow. "We find in favor of the plaintiff, Elena Rivera." The room erupted. Supporters cheered, reporters scrambled for their notebooks, and Rachel's face went pale. The jury had ruled that Sterling Tech had violated its own contracts by failing to properly compensate me for my contributions. Worse still, they found evidence of gender discrimination in how I'd been treated compared to male counterparts. The damages awarded were staggering, a figure large enough to send shockwaves through Silicon Valley. But the real victory wasn't the money. It was the precedent we set. The ruling included a mandate for Sterling Tech to implement sweeping reforms: transparent promotion processes, equal pay audits, and protections for whistleblowers. For the first time, a major tech company would be forced to confront the inequalities baked into its foundation. In the aftermath, Rachel resigned. Rumor had it she tried to negotiate a golden parachute, but the board refused, unwilling to risk further scandal. Without her leadership, Sterling Tech began to crumble. Competitors swooped in, poaching top talent and acquiring key assets. Within 2 years, the company that had once dominated the industry was sold off in pieces. As for me, I chose not to rest on my laurels. With the settlement funds, I founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting underrepresented voices in tech. We provided mentorship programs, legal aid for workers facing discrimination, and grants for innovators whose ideas might otherwise go unrecognized. Our mission was simple: to create a world where no one had to fight alone. Priya Patel became one of my closest collaborators. Together, we built a network of advocates determined to change the system from within. Women and men who had once feared speaking out now stepped forward, emboldened by the knowledge that change was possible. One day, as I stood on stage at a conference addressing hundreds of aspiring engineers, I realized something profound. This journey hadn't been about revenge after all. It had been about transformation of myself, of the industry, and of the countless lives touched along the way. Looking out at the crowd, I smiled. "The future belongs to those brave enough to imagine it," I said. "And I believe, in fact I know, that you are the ones who will shape it." Applause filled the room, echoing long after I stepped away from the microphone. Somewhere in the distance, rain began to fall, washing away the dust of old battles and paving the way for new beginnings. It was over, but in many ways it was only the start.